A single email, no subject line, no signature, just 3 words cold as steel, Clause 8 invoked. And within 72 hours, the entire revenue structure of the company I'd built for over a decade began to crack from the inside. You think you're irreplaceable until they replace you, but you forget the most important thing: who actually built everything from the ground up. Who knows where every pressure point lies? Who wrote the contracts? And who kept one very particular clause tucked away for exactly this moment? My name is Emily Rhodes, and I've spent the last 11 years building something I thought was mine. The conference room smelled like fresh paint and nervous sweat when they called me in that Tuesday morning. I'd worn my navy Armani, the one I saved for board presentations and client dinners. Seemed appropriate for what I assumed would be a formality. "Emily, please, have a seat." Margaret from HR smiled too wide, her lipstick bleeding slightly at the corners. That should have been my first warning. Kenneth, our CEO, sat at the head of the table, studying his phone like it contained nuclear codes. Gerald, the COO, wouldn't meet my eyes. He just kept adjusting his cufflinks left, right, left again. "We've made our decision regarding the VP of Strategic Accounts position," Kenneth said, still not looking up. I straightened my spine. This was it. The role I'd essentially created, nurtured, and expanded from a 2-person operation to a department managing 60% of company revenue, the role everyone knew was mine before it was even posted. "We've decided to go in a different direction." The words hung in the air like smoke from a dead fire. "Kyle Harper will be taking the position, effective Monday." Kyle Harper, Gerald's son, the one who joined us 6 months ago from his failed real estate marketing venture, the one who still asked me to explain the difference between SaaS and PaaS in our leadership meetings. I didn't blink, didn't shift, just let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable for everyone but me. "I see," I finally said. 2 words, neutral as Switzerland. Margaret launched into something about fresh perspectives and new blood and exciting changes ahead. Her hands fluttered like dying moths. I watched them instead of listening to her words. Gerald finally spoke. "Emily, you're invaluable to this organization, absolutely invaluable. We have other opportunities." "Of course," I cut him off. Standing, smooth, professional. "Thank you for letting me know." I walked back to my office with measured steps, closed the door, sat at my desk, and opened the bottom drawer, the one with the false back I'd installed myself years ago. The contract was exactly where I'd left it. 37 pages of dense legal text, most of it standard corporate boilerplate. But page 23, section 8, subsection C, that was all mine. I'd insisted on it during my last contract renewal. They'd laughed, called it paranoid, unnecessary. "Why would you need protection against nepotism? Emily, we're a meritocracy here." Gerald's signature was right there at the bottom. So was Kenneth's. The clause was elegant in its simplicity. In the event of demonstrable nepotistic practices affecting the signatory's career advancement, all client relationships developed and maintained primarily by the signatory shall remain transferable without restriction, superseding any non-compete agreements. My phone buzzed. A text from Celia at Alteryx. "Heard about Kyle. You okay?" Word traveled fast in this industry. By tomorrow, every major client would know. By Friday, they'd be wondering if the person who'd managed their accounts for a decade was still their point of contact. I pulled out my personal laptop and began drafting an email. 3 words were all I needed, but the recipients that required thought: legal, Kenneth, Gerald, and of course, the entire board of directors. Subject line, blank. Body Clause 8, invoked. I hit send at exactly 4:58 p.m., 2 minutes before officially end of day. Then I packed my personal items, there weren't many, and left my company laptop on the desk. The security guard nodded as I passed. "Have a good evening, Ms. Rhodes." "I intend to," I told him. And for the first time in 11 years, I meant it. The first call came at 6:12 p.m., before I'd even reached my car. "Kenneth." I let it ring. The second came from Gerald at 6:15, then legal at 6:21. By the time I pulled into Murphy's bar, I had 17 missed calls and my phone was vibrating like an angry wasp. Murphy's hadn't changed in 20 years: dim lights, worn leather, and bourbon that didn't need a fancy name to be good. I ordered a Blanton's, neat, and found my usual corner booth. "Celebrating or commiserating Jack the bartender?" asked as he set down my glass. "Planning," I said, and took my first sip. My phone lit up again, this time a text from Richard Vaughn, head of legal. "Emily, we need to discuss your email. This is not how professionals handle disputes." I almost laughed. Professionals, like giving the VP role to the COO's incompetent son, was professional. Another text, from Kenneth. "This is unnecessary. Let's talk tomorrow." I turned my phone face down and focused on the amber liquid in my glass. Clause 8 had been my insurance policy, drafted by my own lawyer, not theirs. I'd paid Sandra Klein $3,000 of my own money to make it bulletproof. Make it so tight a nuclear submarine couldn't find a leak. I'd told her. "You expecting trouble?" she'd asked. "I'm expecting human nature," I'd replied. The clause was specific. Demonstrable nepotistic practices. Kyle Harper, son of Gerald Harper, receiving a position he was unqualified for while the primary candidate was passed over. Check. Client relationships developed and maintained primarily by the signatory. Every major account Vexeron boasted Alteryx. Convergent, ardent systems. I'd brought them in. I'd nurtured them through crises, expansions, and contract renewals. My signature was on every original agreement. Check. Transferable without restriction. No non-compete could touch me. No solicitation clause could stop me. Those relationships were mine to take. Check. By my third bourbon, I'd turned my phone back on to find 43 missed calls and an email from Richard that was practically vibrating with panic. "Emily, I've reviewed Clause 8. We need to discuss interpretations. Please respond immediately." Interpretations. Lawyers speak for, "we're fucked and we know it." I pulled out my personal laptop and opened a new browser. The domain had been sitting unused for 2 years, Sable North Strategies.com. I'd bought it on a whim. Liked the sound of it. Strong but subtle, like me. I began sketching out a simple landing page. Nothing flashy, just a logo and a contact form. Tomorrow, I'd file the LLC paperwork. Nevada, not Delaware, better privacy protections. Another. Jack gestured to my empty glass. "Just water," I said. "I have work to do." My phone buzzed. Celia from Alteryx again. "Got a weird call from your legal team. They seemed panicked. Everything okay?" I typed back, "Everything's perfect. Free for coffee Thursday." "Absolutely. You know where to find me." I did know. Just like I knew Martin at Convergent always took calls at 7 a.m. sharp. Like I knew Joel at Ardent Systems valued loyalty above everything else. Like I knew exactly how much each of them disliked corporate bureaucracy and nepotism. Knowledge, relationships, trust. You can't transfer those in a promotion. You can't hand them to your son like a set of car keys. But you can invoke Clause 8 and take them with you when you leave. I paid my tab and headed home. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tonight, I'd sleep better than I had in months. My phone rang one more time as I pulled into my garage. "Gerald." This time, I answered. "Emily, this is a mistake. You're burning bridges." "No, Gerald," I interrupted, my voice calm as still water. "I'm using the bridge I built, exactly as the contract allows. We can work this out. The VP position. Maybe we were hasty. Clause 8 has been invoked. Have legal contact my attorney if there are questions." I hung up before he could respond. Then I turned off my phone, went inside, and poured myself a glass of wine. The war hadn't started. It was already over. They just didn't know it yet. I didn't resign. Didn't send a farewell email. Didn't update LinkedIn. On Wednesday morning, I simply didn't exist in Vexeron's ecosystem anymore. My keycard was deactivated at midnight. My email bounced back messages with a generic user not found error. My name vanished from the company directory like I'd been erased by a particularly thorough Soviet bureaucrat. But my phone, my personal phone, kept ringing. "Emily, it's Martin. I just called your office and they said you're no longer with the company." Martin Zhao from Convergent sounded confused, maybe a little panicked. "That's correct," I said, sipping green tea in my home office. "As of yesterday. But we have the platform migration next month. You're the only one who understands our infrastructure requirements." I'm sure Kyle Harper will get up to speed quickly. Silence. Then Kyle who? Gerald Harper's son, your new VP of Strategic Accounts. The pause stretched longer this time. I see. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Not about Vexaron, about you. By noon, I'd fielded similar calls from Joel at Ardent and Celia at Alteryx. Each conversation followed the same pattern: confusion, concern, then careful probing about my future plans. I gave them all the same response: I'm exploring options, but I'll always have time for friends. Friends, not clients. The distinction mattered. Sandra Klein, my lawyer, called at 2:15 p.m. Vexaron's legal team is having what we call a significant emotional event. They've sent 3 different interpretations of Clause 8, each more creative than the last. And they're grasping at straws. The language is clear. You wrote it. I perfected it. They signed it. They're especially upset about the phrase, relationships developed and maintained primarily by the signatory. They're arguing primarily is subjective. Pull the client files, I said. Every initial meeting, every contract negotiation, every crisis call at 2 a.m., my name, my cell number, my signature. Tell them to find just one significant interaction in the past 5 years that didn't involve me. Already did. They've gone quiet since I sent the documentation. Good. What else? They're threatening to challenge the incorporation of your new company, claiming unfair competition. I smiled at that. Hard to compete with a company that doesn't exist yet. You haven't filed. Just bought the domain. Haven't even registered the LLC. No marketing, no announcements, no solicitation. I'm just a private citizen having coffee with old friends. Sandra laughed. Brilliant. They can't claim you're competing if you're not actually in business. After we hung up, I went back to designing my website. Simple, clean, professional. No client list, no service details. Just a contact form and a single line of text. Strategic consulting for companies that value relationships. My doorbell rang at 4:30 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw a courier holding an envelope marked Urgent, Legal Correspondence. I signed for it, already knowing what it contained. Cease and desist. Demands to return proprietary information. Threats of litigation if I contacted any Vexaron clients. I photographed every page and forwarded them to Sandra with a single question. Aren't cease and desist orders supposed to reference actual legal violations? Her response came quickly. They're panic shooting. This is what desperation looks like in legalese. That evening, I met an old colleague for dinner. Maya Sullivan had left Vexaron 2 years ago after being passed over for promotion in favor of someone's golf buddy. Heard you nuked them, she said over sushi. I invoked a contract clause, hardly nuclear. Emily, you took their biggest accounts without firing a shot. That's not nuclear, that's surgical. I haven't taken anything. I'm unemployed, remember? She grinned. Right, unemployed. That's why Martin Zhao called me today asking if I knew your new contact information. Did you give it to him? I told him you were exploring options, but that you always had time for friends. She raised her sake cup. To friendship. To friendship, I echoed. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. I checked it at a red light. Ms. Rhodes, my name is Patricia Stern from Meridian Tech. We haven't met, but Martin Zhao speaks highly of you. Would you be available for coffee next week? A new player. Someone who'd heard the whispers, sensed the shift in the wind. I didn't respond. Not yet. Let them wonder. Let them wait. The ghost in their spreadsheet was just getting started. The first signs appeared in Vexaron's Thursday morning revenue meeting. I wasn't there, of course, but Maya still had friends inside, and corporate gossip travels faster than light in a vacuum. Gerald's assistant says the forecast dashboard looked like someone had taken a machete to it. Maya told me over lunch. Red arrows everywhere. I speared a piece of salmon. Market volatility. In 9 days, these things happen. She laughed. Right, and I'm sure it's completely unrelated to Alteryx moving their contract renewal to pending review status. I hadn't told Celia to do that, hadn't asked her to do anything. Actually, we'd simply had coffee Wednesday morning, where she'd mentioned unprompted that she was concerned about the leadership transition and wanted to reassess the partnership alignment. Her words, not mine. By Friday afternoon, The whispers had become murmurs. Kyle Harper had called an emergency strategic accounts team sync with a banner reading "Break the Mold" Comic Sans font and all. Apparently, he opened with an icebreaker about everyone's favorite pizza toppings. Jorge texted me. He still worked there, trapped in a middle management role. Then he asked if anyone could explain why the Q3 forecast had dropped 24%. And CFO said it was seasonal churn. Kyle believed him. Seasonal churn, in September, for enterprise software contracts. I filed the Nevada LLC paperwork that afternoon. Sable North Strategies, officially born at 3:47 p.m. Pacific Time. No fanfare, no announcements, just a registration number and a tax ID. Sandra called an hour later. Vexaron's legal team is requesting a formal meeting. They want to clarify the parameters of Clause 8 implementation. Do I need to attend? Not unless you want to watch grown lawyers cry. I'll handle it. That evening, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the breathing pattern before he even spoke. Kenneth. Emily. Kenneth. This is destroying us. I'm unemployed. How could I destroy anything? Don't play games. Altrix, Convergent, Ardent, they're all wobbling. Have you tried having Kyle Harper explain your value proposition to them? I hear he's very enthusiastic about breaking molds. Silence. Then, what do you want? Nothing. I invoked a legal clause in my contract. The rest is just market dynamics. Bullshit. You planned this. I planned for the possibility that merit might lose to nepotism. The contract you signed acknowledged that possibility too. We could have worked something out. A different role. More money. You gave my job to someone who can't spell sass without autocorrect. That's not Kyle has potential. Kenneth, I built 60% of your revenue stream. Not potentially. Actually. And you handed it to someone whose main qualification is sharing DNA with Gerald. More silence. I could hear papers shuffling. Probably the revenue reports that were keeping him up at night. The board is asking questions, he finally said. They should. This could get ugly. Legal battles. Reputation damage. For whom I'm a private citizen who left a company after being passed over for promotion. You're a CEO who just lost a quarter of his forecast in under 2 weeks. Emily. Clause 8, Kenneth. Read it again. Then read your revenue projections. Then decide if you really want to talk about reputation damage. I hung up. An hour later, Martin Zhao called. Hypothetically, if someone were starting a strategic consulting firm, what kind of retainer would make sense? Hypothetically. Purely theoretical, although Convergence Board did just approve a new consulting budget. Theoretical budget, of course. Of course, well, theoretically, it would depend on the scope of services. Full strategic oversight, platform migration, stakeholder management, the kind of things that require deep, trusted relationships. Theoretically, that sounds like a significant commitment. 7 figures worth of theoretical commitment. I smiled at my reflection in the window. That's a very specific theory, Martin. I'm a specific kind of theoretical client who values specific kinds of relationships, the real kind, not the nepotistic kind. I'll keep that in mind, theoretically. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and made a single update to the Sable North website. Under the contact form, I added one line. Now accepting select consultations. My phone immediately buzzed. 3 emails, all from addresses I recognized, all with subject lines that contained some variation of consultation request. The ghosts were gathering, and Vexaron's spreadsheets were just beginning to bleed. Monday morning brought the kind of chaos that makes corporate executives reach for antacids and attorneys. Jorge texted me at 7:23 a.m. Emergency board meeting called. Gerald looks like he hasn't slept. Kyle showed up in a polo shirt. A polo shirt? To a board meeting about hemorrhaging revenue. The jokes wrote themselves. I was in my kitchen, reviewing consultation agreements when Sandra called. Just finished the Clause 8 clarification meeting. It was educational. How so? They tried to argue that client relationships are corporate assets, not personal ones. I pointed out that according to their own HR documents, relationship building was a personal competency you were evaluated on annually. And then they pivoted to claiming you'd stolen proprietary information. I asked for specifics. They mentioned client contact information. I reminded them that Celia, Martin, and Joel all have your personal cell phone number. Hard to steal something you're already given. What's their next move? Honestly, I think they're out of moves. Richard Vaughn looked defeated, just kept muttering about precedent. I signed the convergent consultation agreement and moved on to Alteryx's. Clean, simple terms, no exclusivity. I wasn't that cruel. Vexaron could still pitch them, still try to retain the business. They just had to do it without me. Good luck with that. By noon, the LinkedIn posts started appearing. Not from me, I maintained my digital silence, but from others. Excited to announce Convergent Technologies has partnered with Sable North Strategies for our critical Q4 initiatives, Martin wrote, tagging no one, but knowing everyone would see. 15 minutes later, Celia. When you find a strategic partner who truly understands your business, you hold on tight. Looking forward to our continued collaboration with Emily Rhodes and Sable North. Joel was more subtle, just changing Ardent Systems' partnership status to in transition, with a cryptic note about evaluating strategic alignments. My phone rang. Kyle Harper. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Emily. It's Kyle Harper, the new VP of... I know who you are, Kyle. Right, of course. Listen, I was wondering if we could meet. Maybe you could walk me through some of the client relationships, just to ensure continuity. The audacity was almost admirable. Kyle, I no longer work for Vexaron. I know, but surely you care about the clients. I do. That's why I'm consulting with them directly now. Silence. I could practically hear his brain trying to process. But that's our revenue. No, Kyle, that's their spend. Where they choose to direct it is their decision. This isn't fair. I just started. How am I supposed to... Figure it out. Break the mold, remember. Emily, please. My dad said... Your dad is the COO. I'm sure he has excellent advice about strategic account management. He said to call you. Said you'd help if I asked nicely. Did he also tell you I was his first choice for the position? Another pause. No. Ask him about that. Then ask yourself why someone would help the person who took their job through nepotism. It wasn't nepotism. I have an MBA. In real estate marketing. Marketing is marketing. Kyle, Alteryx runs a distributed quantum computing platform. Can you explain what that means? Silence. Can you tell me their primary competitive advantage? More silence. Do you even know what SAS stands for without Googling it? This is harassment, he finally sputtered. No, these are basic questions your clients will ask. Good luck. I hung up and turned my phone to silent. 3 more consultation agreements waited in my inbox. 2 from companies I'd never worked with before. Word was spreading beyond my original client base. Patricia Stern from Meridian Tech had moved from coffee invitation to a formal meeting request. We're looking for someone who understands relationship-driven growth. Her email read, Your name keeps coming up. I made a note to follow up, but first, I had a call with Maya. Still interested in leaving corporate, I asked when she answered. Depends. You offering? Operations director. Small team. Big clients. No corporate bullshit. When do I start? How about now? I need someone I trust handling fulfillment while I'm in meetings. Emily Rhodes. Building an empire. No, I corrected. Building something better. Something where merit matters and relationships aren't disposable. And burning Vexiron to the ground in the process. I looked at my calendar. 14 meetings scheduled over the next 3 days. All with either current Vexiron clients or their competitors. I'm not burning anything. Maya, I'm just taking what I built with me. If that burns them down, then they should have read Clause 8. Exactly. By Thursday, day 18 of Sable North's existence, the numbers spoke louder than any corporate announcement. 3 7-figure contracts signed, not proposals or letters of intent signed, sealed, and delivering revenue. My little 4-person operation was running at 72% margins, while Vexiron's latest all-hands meeting had devolved into what Jorge described as professional panic. Kyle sent an email to the entire Alteryx distribution list. Maya informed me over our morning status call. The whole list. Engineers, executives, janitors, everyone. What did it say? Subject line, let's touch base on your needs. Body copy included the phrase synergistic partnership optimization 4 times. I closed my eyes. Please tell me you're joking. Celia forwarded it to me with just 3 words, are you serious? That afternoon, I stood in our new office, a modest but elegant space in the Meridian building. No corporate art, no motivational posters, just clean lines, natural light, and a view of the bay. Olivia Chen arrived first, laptop bag slung over her shoulder, smile wider than I'd seen it in years. She'd been Vexaron's best project manager until they'd promoted someone's drinking buddy over her. This is really happening, she said, looking around. It is ready to run point on the convergent migration. Born ready, Martin already sent over the project requirements. They're extensive. Can you handle it? She grinned. Emily, I've been handling it for 3 years. I just never got credit. Jorge arrived next, having given notice that morning. Gerald actually asked if I was going to work for you. When I said yes, he just nodded and said, smart move. He said that, verbatim. Then he asked if you were hiring anyone else. By 4 p.m., we were fully operational. 4 people, 3 major clients, and a pipeline that grew every time my phone rang. No bureaucracy, no politics, no meetings about meetings, just work, executed with precision by people who'd been overlooked and undervalued for too long. Sandra called during our first team dinner. Update from the legal front. Vexaron's threatening to sue for tortious interference. On what grounds? They claim you're actively soliciting their clients. Have I solicited anyone? No. You've responded to inquiries and accepted consultations. Completely different thing. Legally speaking, I told them if they want to proceed, they'll need to prove you initiated contact. Which they can't. Exactly. Richard Vaughn actually laughed when I pointed that out. I think he's given up. After dinner, I returned to the office alone. The city lights sparkled below as I reviewed our financial projections. In less than 3 weeks, we'd captured contracts worth 40% of Vexaron's annual revenue. By Q1, if current negotiations proceeded, we'd hit 60%. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, but the area code was